Perfect. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Wild About Art, Creatively Connecting Science and Nature Through Art. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. We will also send up a follow-up email to everyone who registered with the link to the recording and any links that we shared during the webinar. Yeah, if you want to share in the chat where you're from, that would be great. Thank you. See people from all over. And if you haven't already, please grab some paper, pencil, and an eraser so that you can follow along with some activities that we'll be doing a little later. And feel free to ask any questions, put them in the chat, and make sure that you set up the two to not just host and panelists, but to everyone so that we can all benefit from the comments and questions that you have. Okay, so the goals for this webinar are to discuss the ties between art and science and nature, discover some hands-on activities that you can use with your students, and learn a little bit more about scientific illustration, and do some hands-on activities as well. So great. I would like to start with a land acknowledgement. So the land on which Cornell University sits upon is this unceded territory of the Gayokono. We want to recognize the honor the painful history of the dispossession of these lands and waters, while also honoring the resiliency of these tribal nations and their ongoing connection to these lands and waters. This is also land where enslaved peoples lived and worked, and whose enslavement transformed this land into what is known today as the United States. We make this acknowledgement to remember the histories of violence that precede our time here, to recognize Indigenous and Black claims to life and land, and to recenter these claims as we commit to better ways of caring for each other and for this land. So seeing the chat here, people are coming in from all over the place. That's great. Thank you for being here. So I am presenting this webinar from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology here in Ithaca, New York. We are a nonprofit membership institution, and our mission is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological resources through research, education, and participatory science focused on birds and nature. So my name is Steph Somerville Zamora. I am the program assistant for the K-12 education team, and I'm joined today by Susan Leiker, our learning coordinator. She will be helping us by monitoring the chat and sharing links. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in there. We also have a special guest from the lab that I'll be introducing later on. So what our team does is that we take all the knowledge and expertise from the lab and create innovative resources and deliver transformative trainings that empower educators to build young people's science skills through nature, participatory science, and inquiry. So those are our three pillars: nature connections, participatory science, and inquiry investigations. And all of our resources and trainings either use one or all three of those pillars. Now, we have lots to share with you today. We'll be starting with how art and science are related, some examples of nature-based art activity that you can use with your students, and a hands-on activity that will be led by Jillian Dittner, which is drawing a bird. And don't worry, if you think you can't draw birds, I thought so too, but after Jillian showed me, I now consider myself an amateur artist. And then we will finish with some questions at the end. So if you don't mind sharing the chat, if you're a science teacher, what is one way you've used art in your science teaching? And if you're an art teacher, what is one way you've used science in your art teaching? Oh, someone's asking about the three pillars. So it's nature connection, participatory science, and inquiry investigations. Okay. Like the journal, yes. Oh, it's moving quickly here. Displaying weather and climate data. Oh, people from Darwin, Australia, all over the place. It was great. Students draw models in chemistry, science sketching. Students create artwork of the face of the moon. Art is a way of self-expression and communication. Yeah, creating their own book of birds. We love doing that. sketching during a nature walk, putting the A in STEAM, love that. Seasonal calendars, yes. Based on the standards. Yep. Remembering the plants you observed. Yeah, I'm glad there's a lot of way you're already incorporating art and science into your teaching. So yes, there are many, many ways. Oh, art teacher, you use nature pigments, nature as paintbrushes. Yeah, those are some of the activities that actually we're mentioning today. So that's great. Yeah, so perfect. Okay. So yes, as we can see in the chat, there are many ways that science and art are connected. And although traditionally they're seen as very distinct disciplines, they're more interconnected than people might think. At the core, they're both methods of inquiry into the natural in the world, the nature of the world, right? So they can art and science, as we'll see later on, and as you mentioned, they intersect in many different ways. Um, but they do have they both contribute to our intellectual and cultural development as well. They enrich our lives and expand different perspectives. And nature is like the key component. Science uses nature and art also uses nature, right? So, but let's focus a little bit on the skills that both artists and scientists have. So what are some examples of those skills that you can think of? If you can share it in the chat, that would be great. Observation, yes. But what else? What else is there? Measurement, comparison, curiosity, wondering, details, patterns, reflections. Yes, these are all very creative thinking. Yes, both art and science require creative thinking, like they generate new ideas, approaches, and solutions for sure. Attention to detail, practice, precision, problem solving, very good. Both artists and scientists encounter different challenges, and being able to uh, identify and analyze and solve those problems effectively are great ways. Yes. Oh, biomimicry, great. Teamwork, yes. So there, yeah. I think it was already mentioned, but yeah, creative thinking, analytical thinking is essential to both, right? Scientists analyze data and artists analyze elements that like composition, color theory, and other forms that they use to create their artworks. Already mentioned problem solving, yes, critical thinking. And I don't know if it's mentioned already, but communication is another one. Effective communication, right, is vital in both art and science. Artists communicate their ideas and emotions through their artwork, and scientists communicate the research science findings. Um, so yes, thank you for sharing. Now, I do want to focus on the one that we all started with, observation, right? And observation is about looking closely at things, and it can help you put together clues to solve nature mysteries, or it can help you notice tiny details to make your art special. Now, the great thing about observation is that it is a transferable skill. Like you can practice observation, and the more you practice it, it helps support critical thinking, right? So we often see that these observations lead to questions and discoveries about our world in science and in nature. So I'm going to show you an image here. And as you look at it, as we've been talking about observation, and does anyone have an idea of what we're looking at? Or what does it remind you of? What do you think these? Feathers up close, butterfly wings, flower petals, fish scales. Okay, snake scales. I see a pattern here, either petals or scales, flowers, lizard scales, pine cones, cool. A mushroom, bird feathers. So when we talk about observation, we can talk with our students, we talk about observing at different scales and different perspectives. And you can see by observing different levels, you can see things that you would have imagined before, right? So you may look at this and are unsure what it might be, but if you zoom out a little, you kind of start to understand what it is in the context. So a lot of people, oh, corn. I originally thought that too when I first saw this image. Um, yeah, I think the answer is coming out more as I zoom out here. Um, yes, it is. These are beautiful butterfly wings, a monarch butterfly. So yeah, just observing things at different levels can change your perspective on what you're looking at. And that's something that we can work with our students on. Now, moving on a little bit to how art and science are related. Art can help communicate important scientific information, and it can also help us remember science better. So how do you think art accomplishes this? How can art help us communicate science information? How can we use art? By focusing on attention to detail, yes. Some students learn visually. That's correct. Yeah, using different learning methods. It helps visualize concepts. A picture is definitely worth 1,000 words. Yes, I agree. It can help us to study, finding out something. More pathways, creating more pathways to the brain. Yes, using, yep, paintings like that one. Yes. So yeah, engagement. I like that, what you put there. Lynn, was it? Yeah. That, yeah, engagement allows students to see more details, slow down and look. And I totally agree, and I think our special guest does too, about there are many things that photos can't capture, so art is definitely needed to fill the gaps. Yeah, great comments here in the chat. And yeah, art can definitely simplify complex ideas for sure, and it helps engage other parts of the brain. Yes. So they both, it helps us understand the world around us better. I'm going to move on to our next slide here, which is um, a little about the history of the connection between science and nature. So even since prehistoric times, art and science have been closely intertwined. Here is an example of a cave painting in Sulawesi in Indonesia that is dated to be approximately about 44,000 years ago when it was created. These cave paintings depict animals, some other ones, not this one in particular, but or hunting scenes, but also celestial objects, and they reflect like the early scientific observations and a fascination with the natural world. They help serve as a means of communication and storytelling or even cultural expression, right? And it also reveals an understanding of the environment and its inhabitants. So if we travel through time a little bit more, um, here is an example of artwork during the Enlightenment era, which emphasized more about reason and empirical observation, critical thinking. This is by Sibylla Marian. I hope I pronounced her name right. She's a German naturalist and illustrator, and she collected and observed insects and their life cycles over many decades. And she created a huge body of work that with detailed drawings at a time when metamorphosis was largely unknown, and many people thought that insects were born out of mud by spontaneous generation, right? So she did a lot of great work introducing the concept there, metamorphosis and the different periods through which insects transition. Um, oh, I love it. Yeah, what Jamie says here. Before art was the only way to capture images of many scientific ideas and process that words couldn't convey. That is definitely true. And if we move a little further in time, around the 1830s, this couple, Elizabeth and John Gould, he was an English taxidermist and she was an artist, husband and wife. And so he did more of the research part and collected the specimens. And she was the illustrator of these beautiful images. Um, when he decided to publish his first volume of bird species, they say that she asked him who would create the illustrations, and she knew that her husband wasn't very artistic and so wouldn't be up to the task. And he said, "Why, you, of course." And in one of his biographies. So her amazing talent helped cement their name in the ornithological history, and she did a great job. The two images on the right are the middle one and the one on the right are some birds in Australia, and the other one is a Himalayan bird. Sadly, her life was cut short, quite young at 37, but her work lives on. If we move to more modern times, the relationship between art and science has definitely continued to evolve. Today, artists explore more scientific concepts and engage with cutting-edge research and even address some pressing social and environmental issues through their work, right? And an example of this is Jane Kim. She is the founder of Inkwell Studio, and she paints scientifically accurate nature murals. Here at the lab, we have one called From So Simple a Beginning, and it is a monumental 2,500 square foot mural um, that presents the journey through 375 million years of evolution. It is amazing. It begins with the earliest marine tetrapods and ends with this celebration of different life-size modern birds from around the globe. Um, we do have a link to this mural you can explore online. And thank you, Susan. She shared it in the chat. So feel free to, after or whenever, take some time to look at it. It's some really cool work that she's done here. Now, it's not just about drawing nature or painting nature, but also you can use natural materials to create art. And here are two examples. There's so many more, but Lorenzo Duran, who is a Spanish artist, he uses leaves as a canvas, and he also connects it with drawings. And then, yes, Andy Goldsworthy, he is a British artist. He uses natural materials to make art in the outdoors, and his work is beautiful as well and very ephemeral, right? So it's out in nature. If a storm comes, if it rains, the wind, his art will change and evolve. So I highly recommend if you have time, look him up as well. I could keep going with a lot of different examples, but from what we've talked about and connections that you already use in your classroom, do you see any new connections between art, nature, and science that can be incorporated into your classrooms? I do have um, a few examples, but anything new popped up? Okay, then I will. So there are many different connections. Oh, someone using art as a way to inspire scientific discovery, art to encourage conservation. Yes, definitely. Yeah, art can show the progression of how we have understood the world of science through time. Definitely. And another example is Ernst Haeckel. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name right, but his work is amazing as well. His detailed illustrations are something to admire greatly. So, like, even though I mentioned at the beginning, historically, art and science have been separated because of the perception that these are very different. Oh, Lewis and Clark, definitely. Yeah, they have done some work too. There's just so many that and we have a limited amount of time. I couldn't show everything I wanted to, but yes, those are all great examples and definitely involve our senses, and it serves as documentation for sure. So, to help create those connections in the classroom, you can um, benefit from, well, by integrating them. Not only does it nurture creativity and critical thinking, but also can help develop strong communication skills, right? Whether you use visual representation or theatrical performance as a written narrative, like there are different artistic mediums that you can use to help your students convey complex ideas in accessible ways. So we have here an example of the Altamira cave paintings. And you can use that, whether you're an art teacher or a nature science teacher, you can use that to connect it to biology. So you can talk about the illustration, the biological illustrations. You can talk about the different species and the evolution through time. You can connect it to chemistry and the different pigments that were used. Um, so ochre was used for the oranges, and some clays for like the reddish and the yellows, and charcoal was used for the black lines. So I connected geology, history, there are so many connections there. The same way if you're like studying outside nature, you're looking at a nest, you can connect that to engineering. How do birds construct their nests? You can connect to biology and talk about the nesting cycle and the life cycles of birds. Biomimicry, how we get inspired by nature. With art, you can talk, yeah, about the symmetry in nature. You can talk about the textures and the patterns. So there's many things you can do. And like an example is you could have your students explore different environmental issues through a combination of either scientific research and artistic expression, along with community engagement. So they can share what they've learned, and whether through like a social media project or some other way to connect with the community and share their knowledge. Someone mentioned it earlier, but STEAM projects are a great way to incorporate all these connections in the classroom. Um, so let's move on because I had so much to share about and talk about actual nature-based art activity that you can use with your students. Um, just to mention a few of the benefits of these nature-based art activities, they help promote mental health and well-being, especially when done in the outdoors. They promote relaxation, they help reduce stress. They even studies show that decrease depression and anxiety as well. But at the same time, they foster self-expression, creativity, and social connection, which leads to increased self-esteem and emotional regulation. They help build connection with nature, and which can help them make your students be more engaged in environmental issues and also be more aware of the ways that nature contributes to their own well-being. And it also promotes environmental literacy. So some of these activities can help develop their environmental knowledge, and it helps develop like their creative and critical thinking skills, and like they can develop own solutions to environmental problems as well once they get more connected. So going straight to the activities. Yeah, the outdoors. Rolf says the outdoors helps me think. It definitely helps me too, completely. Love being in the outdoors. So I divided these activities and just a few examples for different grade levels, but then we're going to show some general ones that can be adapted to your students and the grade level and subjects that you teach. So when you're talking about toddlers and preschoolers, I would focus more on the tactile or the sensory exploration. And that's from finger painting with mud and stamping with leaves or drawing in the dirt with sticks. It's all about the experience. And when they get older, I think maybe around 3 or so, I have a little one, but she's too small yet for scissors. But you can introduce simple tools like safety scissors or to cut the leaves, and use a hole punch to get flower petals, or like to get more fun textures to play with, and do a lot of different designs. If you're an elementary teacher, you can focus more on the fine motor skills. And so painting, someone mentioned it before, painting with nature paint brushes, drawing what you see in nature. And if you want to incorporate technology, of course, use cameras, but nature coloring books as well, and creating land art. So, and if you're more focused on middle or high school students, you can use more complex activities like actually doing biological illustrations, incorporate nature photography, digital art creation, where you just mix different with photography and other illustration designs online, and my personal favorite, nature journals. And we'll talk more about that soon. So think about how you might modify the following activity that I'm going to share concrete examples of, how you can fit that to your students' grade level and your subjects that you're teaching. The first one being the rainbow hike. So here is where you practice their observation skills, right? You can go outside and find different colors of the rainbow, and you can have them draw or take photos of them. or collect, but hopefully leave nature as intact as possible. And if you can't do it outside, you can alter it so you can do it inside by observing things online, either the mural that we linked earlier or just some other video as well. Yes, it's one of my favorites. So nature rubbing, just go outside, gather different materials, leaves, feathers, bark, and you can just put a piece of paper on top and rub it with crayons or pencils and to reveal the textures. And you can use it to connect to like some science class, like the biodiversity, like discuss the difference in the variation in the leaves and observe the anatomical features of whether it's a leaf or a feather or whatever you are using to rub on. Now, nature paintbrushes, someone mentioned they already did this. Love that. You can just find different elements in nature, but also make sure that you have like a stick or a popsicle, like something hard that you can use to tie the softer elements, like the leaves or grasses or the pine needles or flower heads, and then use paints and just use that to create different paintbrushes. Now, we also have nature mandalas. I don't know if you've done this before. It's also personal favorite. Um, it's basically a mandala is a geometric shape that means circle, and that circle is meant to show that everything in life is connected. And so you just find different natural materials and you create different designs. And this is meant to be ephemeral, right? Not permanent. I do recommend that when you're asking your students to go outside and collect things, make sure that there's like no poison ivy around or that there aren't any insects or other animals that can harm them in any way. And also always try to remember to not do any harm to nature and leave it as intact as possible. So another easy one to do, and it's fun, is take a photo or drawing of a natural element from a different perspective. So pretend you can either look at if you see a frog, try to take a picture from the frog's perspective. Like, what is a frog looking at? And the same, or you can just choose a habitat and put it up on the slide on your classroom and say like, this is a pond. So look at it from the eagle's perspective, or a heron's perspective, or the frog, or some other animal. Or depending on the habitat you're in, you can use a desert, marsh, beach. Like there's plenty of options. So yeah, try different angles and perspectives. Now, my favorite, the nature journaling. It's very wonderful activity. It definitely merges art, nature, and science perfectly. The good thing about this is that it uses writing and drawing, so it provides students that have different strengths, different points of entry. The writing part of it helps students practice in organizing their thoughts. It helps articulate and clarify ideas about their observations and helps strengthen memories by recording them. So I know that when I draw things or write things down, it helps me remember things a lot easier. And the writing can be both descriptive or creative, like poetry. I'm more of the descriptive person. But and you can provide support to your students by providing prompts or subjects for their observation, and you can connect those prompts to your units and learning goals as well. Now, focusing on the drawing aspect of nature journaling, it encourages close observation and it allows us to notice details that we'd otherwise miss and helps improve memory. And it can also be descriptive, more like a scientific drawing, more accurate, or just creative. And it also depends on the grade level. I do recommend that when you're providing feedback to your students, stay away from complimenting just the beauty or the skill of a drawing. I mean, not to say you can't, but also focus on complimenting their observation skills and the effort and their growth throughout time if you're journaling through a long period of time. Now, I asked you to get some paper and pencil and an eraser. So we're going to do a quick challenge, sketch challenge. So let's pretend that you are an ornithologist who needs to sketch a bird quickly. And why? Because birds move, right? So you have to be quick and try to remember the size and the shape, like silhouette, the color patterns, what colors are on what parts of the bird, and the habitat that the bird is in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a video and I want you to write some notes about the bird to help you identify it later, but also try to draw it. We don't have to be experts, just try. And Okay, if you're ready, I'm gonna start the video. Can you see the video? Yes, I hope.
Yes, we can see it.
Great. So focus on the brown bird, not the woodpecker that comes and goes. That's a brown bird is the one we're going to try to ID. There are many individuals of that species. So we're going to ignore the woodpecker. Remember to focus on the size, the shape, the colors. Now this video is from our bird cams. It is our Panama bird feeder camera. Um, and, oh, okay, perfect. Let me stop it. So based on your drawing and notes, what bird were we watching? We have the option of the palm tanager, the buff-throated saltator, the clay-colored thrush, and the cocoa wood creeper. Ooh, it seems pretty unanimous. The thrush, everybody says. And that is correct, the clay-colored thrush, which just happens to be the national bird of Costa Rica. Um, so yes. Now, what do you think was challenging about trying to do a quick sketch? What did you find challenging about it? The bird is moving. Yeah, you don't everything. Love that. It changed positions a lot. Yes, definitely a lot of movement. The tail. Yes. The switching of the position. Yeah, there's the proportions, the movement. Didn't know where to start. Well, that's all okay because yeah, wait, that's a good one, Linda. Hard to determine size, no scale reference. Yeah, well, the woodpecker was our closest one. We didn't have any bigger birds around. So yeah, with the lighting, the movement, the changes in the patterns and colors for sure. So the good thing about that is that today we have a special guest, a science illustrator from here, the Cornell Lab, who will teach us um, how to draw a bird. So I'm going to pass this on to Jillian Dittner. And I'm going to highlight Jillian, if you don't mind starting your video, your camera, so that I can see. Okay, and I will pin you to the first screen. Now, everyone, if you go to my view, um, if you go to my view and select speaker view so you can see who's going to be speaking, I'm going to mute myself and let me know if you can see Jillian's um, screen in a minute. Okay, Jillian's all yours.
Okay, Steph, thanks. So I can see my desk. Can everybody see my desk? Are we good? Okay, fantastic. All right, well, it's great to be here with you, and I'm looking forward to doing a little drawing session in a minute. First of all, I work as a biological illustrator at the Cornell Lab, as well as a graphics editor for Living Bird magazine. My work ties in illustration, graphic design, for the bigger goal of science communication. So in this slide, you can see a couple examples of hopefully how science illustration can help to clarify information and better communicate. So I'll go through a couple of these examples. In the Blue Jays, for starting off, that's a good example of how illustration can isolate imagery in the foreground from busy backgrounds. So when you're looking at a photo, you've got so much going on. You've got lighting, you've got composition. If you look at an illustration that's being created to portray the ideal specimen, then you can really distill what needs to be shown to an audience to facilitate learning. Moving on, we can look at the woodpeckers at the top. These are hairy woodpeckers. This is a good example of how illustration can capture a very specific behavior that might be captured in a photo or a video, but maybe 10 photos would express what an illustration could more clearly get across. And this is an aggressive behavior. And when we move on to the song sparrows, there's a stack of song sparrows. This is a good example of making clear comparisons between species with very similar appearances. So across the United States, song sparrows change pretty strongly, like in their appearance, based on not only their plumage color, but their weight and their heftiness, I'll say. So illustration can show that really clearly as well by arranging them all in a view that does that. And then lastly, the orioles here are an example of how you can simplify through different creative decisions, complicated plumage and differences in field markings to make it easier for idea, make it easier to understand what's being communicated. And so in this case, showing the genetic components of why these two species look different. All right, we can move on. And so if you're interested in learning or seeing visuals that we produce, beautiful photography and stories about bird, ornithological science, check out Living Bird. It's available through subscription, membership with the lab. The website is listed below. And also wanted to mention a really cool artist residency that we host here at the lab called the Bartel Science Illustration Program. And that's where we invite artists to come for year-long sessions. They stay with us in Ithaca, New York, at the lab, and they create projects for a wide range of different departments here on site. So if you want to go to the next slide, I've got some examples of some projects that illustrators have contributed to. So we do creative membership projects like tote bags and mugs, and we also do educational posters for Bird Academy, Project Feeder Watch, a few different departments and projects. So, okay, I think we can probably dive in now. So I asked everyone if you have your pencil, a clean piece of paper, an eraser would be great. And I think that's pretty much all we need. You're going to be using the chickadee on my screen, so we'll just all be drawing from that chickadee there. And so when I start off any bird drawing, I like to loosen up a little bit, because a lot of the times when students, anybody new to drawing, starts drawing, they often, press really hard and kind of use that grip that's used with writing your name. Let's say if everyone wants to practice that, just write your name really quickly on the page, and you'll see what your grip is like. It's very tight tripod grip is what we call it. And when we're sketching, we want to kind of loosen that grip up. So for example, you can open up your hand a bit and let your pencil kind of loosely sit within it. And I want to get this part of my hand, which is, I guess, I'm not exactly sure how to describe this part, but basically I want to like plant my hand on the paper like this and have it be making contact so that I have some support. And then let's just warm up with some scribbles on like a random piece of paper that you have, but not your main drawing page. Let's just loosen it up so that we get away from that tripod grip. Okay, and once you've done some scribbles, quickly do the same thing with trying to get a nice circle on your page. And we'll try an oval too, just so you're really loosened up. All right. So with that in our minds, let's move to this chickadee. And I'm going to put some tracing paper over just to show you what I'm getting at here. First of all, I'm going to really lightly just sketch in the head, like a circle for the head and an oval for the body. Doesn't have to be like, I'm not asking you guys to do this. So this is just something I want to show you so that you can see that within almost, within any bird, really, you've got basic shapes that you can identify. And then within this chickadee, the chickadee has quite a large head, and we're going to think a little bit about the proportion of the head to the body. Somebody's asking, can we flip to have the drawing on a bigger screen? Yes, I know we have a bit of a technical issue with that. Oh, does that make it any clearer? Perfect. Okay, so keeping this basic shapes idea in mind, we're going to move to our paper, our final sort of like, it's sketchbook paper, piece of white paper, and we're going to apply what we just talked about. So really loose, we're going to sketch in a circle for the head. Usually I would use a blue pencil in my class to teach it, which erases really well. But for now, we're going to just use 2B or HB, whatever you have on hand there. We'll just get some nice light shapes on the page. I'm going to sketch a little darker just to make sure everyone can see what I'm doing. So once you've got the head placed and an oval for the body, we're going to go ahead and look for some angles around this bird. So if I use my pencil as a marking, as a way to gauge the angle of, let's say, the back first, I could even like pull this over and use it exactly, but just in general, you're getting a sense of what the angle is on the back of the bird. And then you're just going to lightly sketch that angle in from the back of the head all the way to the bottom of the wing. Okay. And then we're going to do the same thing at the head area. So I'm looking at this chickadee and I'm seeing almost a straight line coming down from the bottom of the bill to the chest area. So I'm just going to lightly sketch that in too. I just noticed the sun is setting and my lighting is changing a little bit, but hopefully that's not too distracting for folks. And then we're going to move around the bird a little bit, just looking for some angles. A lot of the time when people are drawing birds, it's tempting to create really rounded birds without any angles. And so that's something that can be helpful to sketch in, is looking for the areas that do have a bit more of a straight edge rather than a super rounded edge or super rounded form. Okay. So once you've got this sort of structure on your page, you can look at the tail angle. So again, you could hold it up if you had your image on the screen or a photo in front of you. You can hold up your pencil to figure out that angle. I almost didn't leave enough space there, but we're going to make it work. And then we also want a line for the bottom of the wing. And you can see it's not quite 90 degrees. There's a bit of an angle to that as well. So these are all observations you are helpful to make note of as you're drawing. And this is one of those great ways to really illustrate how drawing helps with observation. I'm learning as I'm drawing right now. I'm learning about this chickadee, its proportions, its markings, as I go. So make sure you get a little line in for your bill as well, which is usually if you look at the top of the head and kind of think about the spacing between the top of the head and the bill and indicate a line for that. feel free to pop anything in the chat too if I'm, going a little quickly or if something's not clear. All right. We can also place the eye now that we have a bit of an indication of where it might land. So I've got a little plant in this office that is attracting tiny bugs. Might be a little distracting, but we'll keep going. So the eye is always above the bill for the line for the bill. And I see a question come in about color. For this drawing, we're going to keep it to a general sketch and graphite drawing. But absolutely, I'll let you know if you were to paint this, when I would stop and switch to paint. Okay, so once you've got the eye in there, we can just start to work around some of the details that we're seeing on this bird. I like to sharpen my pencil or make sure, or try out a mechanical pencil at this point. Now that we've got this rough sketch on the page, we can start to look for those details that are going to make this bird look like a chickadee. So you can darken up a little bit of the contour lines as you go, if you're confident where they're placed. And we could even start to work on the markings a little bit. So I'm going to start to get this sort of dark black crown in place. Got a little black chin. Should you erase while going or just correct it? So that's a good question. I try not to erase when I'm at that more gestural drawing phase where it's just shapes and a few lines connecting. I try to keep those in place while I refine the outer contour lines and the lines that will make up the sort of more central part of the body. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with erasing these lines once we get a little bit further along. I may have already erased a little bit, but that's more of a trying to make it clear for the video, for the webinar. So wings can be pretty tricky. A folded wing has a lot going on here. We won't get into every detail. This is more about observation. So draw what you see. However, I'll just point out that there are some main feather groups. We've got secondary feathers here stacked on top of, these are secondaries here, stacked on top of longer primaries. And we've got, the primary coverts here and the secondary coverts here. And these are Alula feathers, but you don't need to know all that terminology. I just wanted to point out that there are a few different groups going on that you can indicate with really just sort of basic shapes here to give them a little bit of detail. But we won't be counting out every feather in this drawing. Oh, my light really changed. Okay, so as I'm going along, I'm just continuing to observe that chickadee photograph and really try to capture what I can from it. And the tail I've kind of left alone, so I'm going to go back and observe that a bit more closely. Something, if you're teaching others how to draw or going through these steps with students, something to mention is to really pay attention to the photograph or the reference material. So something I like to remind students about is trying to look 80%, well, let's say let's say 70% at the photograph or reference, and 30 at your actual drawing. So you want to be really looking at that reference as you're going along and glancing back at your drawing. You don't want to only focus on your drawing, because then you won't be observing that subject closely. Okay, and you might have noticed that there's no legs on this bird. I often leave them till a little later just to make sure that I've got everything balanced, and then I can start to look at what they're doing. Something I mentioned in the handout that's available after this webinar is tangent lines, which are you can line up different areas of your of the bird that you're drawing. So, for example, this little foot here lines up kind of mid back on the photograph. And I don't have to be perfect about that. I can kind of just keep that in mind, that I can always go back to tangent lines to get more accuracy. We're going to add detail. We are going to see, let's see how much time we have. We have a little bit more time, and we're going to try to get into a little bit of detail. But the first things first is making sure you've got your proportions correct and everything placed as it should be. So I know it seems like it might take a little bit of time to get this drawing, this sort of sketch drawing in place, but then it's a foundation for a more detailed drawing that you can go as far as you want with. So sketching in those little feet, and then lastly a branch. Branch comes last because it's the easiest thing to change. And again, if you drew the branch first, you're making your whole drawing fit around the branch. That's why I do the branch last. All right, and so in terms of detail, you probably want to start to see a little bit of, let's say, value or shading on this bird. At this point, I've got enough in place that I am going to erase some of those earlier basic shapes just to clean this drawing up. So go ahead and do that if you have an eraser. If you don't, it's totally fine. This is just a great way to start learning about proportion and basic bird sketching. We don't need to make perfect, beautiful art right now. Okay, so when we're doing, if you're using a pencil like I have here, mechanical, you can use cross-hatching to build up value. So that would be parallel lines, creating a grid in different directions till you build up the value you want. If you're using graphite, you could, of course, just shade in with graphite, creating sort of a darker shade like this. But I do like how cross-hatching allows you to control a little bit of the value. So I just try to think about the feather direction on the bird before I start, and then I just start to build up the value with some cross-hatching here. We're doing that little bib on the chickadee, or chin rather. And we're getting pretty close to time, so I'm not gonna get to all the shading that I want, but I do want to point out that the eye is really important in a drawing, and it can add so much life and expression to your birds. So make sure that you're giving a little bit of time to find that reflection. You can draw around it so you don't fill it in, and then get your nice sort of darkest values into that eye to really make it pop. That's going to help the drawing come alive. Did you say the eye is in line with the center of the beak? So it's actually above. Yeah. And that's something applies to every bird. It's kind of a rule you can keep in mind. All right, so let me see. It's funny because I looked a lot at my chickadee here, and then I look back at this, my actual drawing, and I see, oh, I think I made that stomach a little bit too low. So this is something you can just keep going back to and modifying. And when I teach students in my class about drawing birds, I emphasize like it's okay to make those mistakes, and actually the important part is seeing the mistake and then fixing it, because there's a lot of that when it comes to science illustration and I guess any drawing. It's always going to be things to modify. All right, so we're pretty close to time, and I think Steph has a few more resources she wants to share. So I think I should probably wrap it up here. Um, but thank you so much for following along, and I'd love to know if there's a way that participants can share their work. It'd be great to see their drawings.
Thank you, Jillian, so much. This was amazing, like everyone's saying in the chat there. Yes, if you want to, I'm going to share some more information, but at the end, you can, if you want, send us some emails, and I'll be happy to share them with Jillian. So I'm going to unpin Jillian. Okay, and I'm going to quickly share my screen again. Okay. Can you see my screen again? Yes. So we do have a few other resources from around the lab that we want to highlight. Um, this one, the Explorer's Guidebook, is a free download. Most of these are free downloads, and has a bunch of different activities, including a sound map, a scavenger hunt, and some bird ID. And it's written at the fourth grade level, but it can be adapted to different levels. And Susan has linked it in the chat, and it'll come up in the follow-up email. We do also have this Nature Quest, that it's basically just a bunch of bite-sized activities that can be done at home or in the classroom. There's more than 50 outdoor and indoor quests, and you can adapt many of them for nature journaling. In particular, we recommend Outdoor Quest 13, um, and you can record your observations in your nature journal. We also have this unit, it's Students as Scientists, which is it's nature-based inquiry, and you can use any subject that you want with it. It's not just birds. It basically guides you through the process of a scientific investigation. Also free, and it's grade banded, so K5 and 612. And then this was already shared with you before, but John Muir Law's Teacher Resources, and it's available as a free download if you don't want to buy the physical book. And has great, it shows a lot of the different approaches to nature journaling. And lastly, we have, so what we've shared is more for student-facing materials, but we also have some Bird Academy courses, which are just online courses that you can take, and it's more for your own personal development. Like if you want to learn how to paint birds, you can do that with Jane Kim, nature journaling and field sketching with Liz Clayton, and bird photography with Melissa Grew, and in flight and just in general as well. So these are other resources that you can find. These are not free, but sometimes we have promotions and stuff. So definitely take a look at them. Now, what questions do you have for us before we go? Oh yeah, we do have a completion letter that you can fill. Susan linked it in the chat. I can send us an email as well. And yeah, thank you for joining us tonight. This is our last webinar of the 2024-2025 school season. So thank you very much for being here. And we hope to see you again when we start our next season in September. How do you encourage kids who don't like art to try something new? That's a good question. Jillian, do you want to chip in? Any thoughts there as more of the artist?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I guess maybe instead of framing it as art and taking a bit of that like judgment out of it, because I think a lot of people, children, even adults, look at their work and they just feel like it's not good enough. And so that's why they're discouraged to create art and they just don't feel like they're good at it. So I think, encouraging as much as possible the observation angle and just, that it doesn't need to be perfect and beautiful. We're just using this more as an observation tool. That might be a good thing to try.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I realized I didn't have my video back on. But thank you everyone for joining us. We're very excited to have you come back in the fall. And yeah, um, we are here. If you need anything, just feel free to send us an email and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And we have our website that has a lot of different resources, also available in other languages as well. So someone's asking about the link to John Muir. Yes, and it was linked above, but we can also we're going to send up a follow-up email to everyone registered, so it will be there as well. So again, thank you everyone, and hope you have a great night or day, depending on where you're at. The bird that we drew was a black-capped chickadee, my personal favorite one here. And yes, the follow-up has a link to the recording. All our webinar recordings can be found in our YouTube channel. So if you look up in YouTube K-12 Education Cornell Lab, you will definitely find us there. And we have all our webinars from across the years linked there. And highlighted are the ones from this 2024-2025 season. So thank you very much. And thank you, Jillian. This is great.